Soldier Today podcast is a product of the Non-Commissioned Officer and Soldier Programs Director at the Association of United States Army. Soldier Today subjects focus on those topics that are relevant and needed by our soldiers and their families serving the regular Army, the Army National Guard, and the Army Reserve. Hello, everyone. I'm Sergeant Major of the Army retired Dan Dailey, and welcome to this edition of Soldier Today podcast. As we all strive to support our nation's efforts to mitigate the impact of COVID-19, the United States Army maintains its commitment to supporting our most valuable resource, our people. General James McConville, Chief of Staff of the United States Army, has made this clear through his number one priority, people first. The personal health and well-being of our service members, civilian employees, and families is paramount. Everyone reacts differently to stressful situations, and certainly an infectious disease outbreak that requires social distancing, quarantine, or isolation is bound to generate stress. Many across our nation and around the world are feeling stress, uncertainty, anxiety, disconnectedness, financial insecurity, as well as potentially feeling hopelessness. For some, including our service members, such experiences can be associated with an increased risk for suicide. Finding healthy ways to cope with stress during this time will help our soldiers to remain strong and mission ready. During this episode of Soldier Today podcast, we will have a discussion with senior Army leaders focusing on the tough subject of the ongoing fight against suicide in our Army. We will also address the importance of developing cohesive teams and how these subjects are an integral part of mission readiness and the Sergeant Major of the Army's This Is My Squad initiative. So these are very important subjects, and joining us in our virtual studio today is General Joseph M. Martin, the 37th Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, accompanied by the 16th Sergeant Major of the Army, Sergeant Major of the Army Michael A. Grinston. Sir, it's great to have you on the show today.
Hey, it's an honor to be here, Sergeant Major, and thank you so much for doing this. I know that I don't want to speak for your follow-on, Sergeant Major of the Army, but we're excited to be able to communicate to you and to the people that will listen to this podcast. I want to start off with something that I just want people to think about as we have this discussion, and it's this thought that if you ask me what the most important thing we're going to talk about today is, if you ask the Vice Chief, I want leaders to care, and I want their soldiers to know they care. And I'll talk a lot more about what that means, but it's really important that people think about it.
Well, sir, I know your time is very valuable and you're very busy in the Pentagon, so thank you for taking the time. And Sergeant Major, thank you for joining us today, too.
Yes, sir. This is really good. You get the Vice Chief, the Sergeant Major, and the former Sergeant Major to do a podcast, so I'm trying to figure out how we align the planets to get this done. This is an important topic for our soldiers and our families and our DA civilians. It's a difficult topic, and we've got a lot of difficult topics in our country right now, but we have to take time to talk about these difficult topics because this is important. This is what we mean when we say people first. We take these things, we don't ignore them, and then we try to make those things better. So as we go through this discussion today, I'm happy that we can, as our Army, we can have these difficult discussions.
Well, absolutely. And gentlemen, thank you again, the both of you, for taking the time. And you're absolutely right, SMA. We know how busy it gets in the day-to-day life of being a soldier. To get the current SMA and the current Vice Chief of Staff of the Army and a former SMA together in one place is, well, let's just say we're thankful for the time today. So, General Martin, if we could, I'd like to start with you, sir. General Martin, we've experienced some difficult and trying times recently as a nation, with the COVID-19 pandemic and domestic strife. It's times like this that have highlighted the importance of taking care of our people. What does it mean to build cohesive teams? And how is the Army using this concept to ensure our people are taken care of?
Sergeant Major, I think it's a great question, and here's my most important point. I want leaders to care and their soldiers to feel like they're being cared for. And so that takes on a whole host of activities that must occur from a soldier first arriving at a unit to the day that a soldier transitions on to his or her next assignment or the next portion of their life if they decide to move on beyond the Army. But it's a focus, cohesive teams, building cohesive teams at the squad or section levels and having meaningful relationships that are built on trust, mutual respect, and empathy at that lowest level, because that's the highest contact level with our soldiers. No one in the Army should know our soldiers better than their first line supervisors. I say squad. Yes, I mean an infantry squad, but it could be a mortar section. It could be a paladin section. It could be a tank crew. It could be a maintenance section. It could be a portion of a medical platoon. But It's leader and led, building relationships amongst each other that are strong so that there's trust. And with that trust, you're able to see things and share things that you wouldn't necessarily share with somebody else. Our soldiers that come into the United States Army are at a very vulnerable state in their life. Most of them are 17 to 24 years of age. They're away from home for the first time in many cases, and they're in an unfamiliar environment. We all remember how daunting that was when we first entered the service, and how there were people that we'll never forget that made it easier for us because they worked with us, they helped develop us, and they helped build a team and made us a part of that team. This is a bit of a cultural shift for the United States Army because we're asking people to truly know your soldiers, truly know each other's. Sergeant Major is going to talk later about a golden triangle, but it's the squad leader, it's the soldier, and the families that make up that team of teams getting to know each other so that we can understand what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are, what makes us concerned, what our vulnerabilities are, and be willing to share them with each other. This allows us to attack the three corrosives that the Chief of Staff and the Secretary of the Army have talked about: sexual assault, sexual harassment, suicide, racism, and extremism. Sexual assault and sexual harassment are a deliberate fratricide. It amazes me every day to think about the fact that I've had the opportunity to meet and read about many of our heroes who have been recipients of valorous awards in combat, and how they would act heroically without any prompting, without any other agenda besides taking care of their fellow soldier. Well, we've got to do the same thing against sexual assault and sexual harassment because it's corrosive to the very foundation of relationships in our formation. So I'm emphasizing the relationship between first-line supervisors, their families, and the battle buddies. Every soldier should have a battle buddy. I've got several. I've got the Sergeant Major of the Army, Chief of Staff of the Army. I've got the Undersecretary of the Army. They are all battle buddies. The Secretary of the Army is a battle buddy. We know each other very well because we talk about each other. We talk about each other's families. We talk about the problems we're trying to solve. We're not holding back and leaving anything in reserve when we discuss those things. That's not easy to do. It's not easy to do for someone that's just graduated from high school or have left home for the first time in their lives. And this is really important that we do this. We build this foundation across the Army. And it takes more than squad leaders to do it. It takes lieutenants and sergeants first classes at platoons that understand that they've got to nurture these relationships, develop the leaders that are supposed to lead these relationships. There's company commanders and first sergeants that have a significant role in it because of their experience and what they can offer to those soldiers and those soldiers that they lead. You can go all the way up to battalion, brigade, division. Everybody in the Army, including myself, has a role in this. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this cast. Why is this so important? Because we understand that we are competing for talent. And our people must feel like they are a valued part of their team. And if they do that, or if they believe that, they will do everything and anything they can do to contribute to that team, be the most that they can be, and absolutely make the right call, doing the right thing the right way every time. You just got to care for them and understand and know that those soldiers feel like we care about them. Sergeant Major, you have anything to add?
I think as we build cohesive teams, I just think of, this is my squad. With a leader in the middle, you think of how do we know each other. I literally just left out of the Newman report, and I really appreciate Dan, you and the team putting that together. But these squad leaders are sitting there telling me about how they grew up and their stories. And I said, well, when's the first time anybody ever asked you this? And they're like, yeah, this is the first time. So we focus in to build a cohesive team. You actually have to know the people, where they came from, how did they grow up. And the Vice, sir, you talked about trust. Well, that's how you build the trust. You just ask that simple question of how did you grow up? And that's what it means to be in my squad. I'm okay opening up to you. I can build that cohesive team because I can talk about those difficult things because we trust each other. And that's kind of what it means to be in my squad.
Yeah, absolutely. And sir, if I could, I'd like to capitalize on something you said that was so powerful and so important. and related to what the SMA is talking about is you said no one should know their soldiers better than their squad leader or their first line leader, as you referred to. SMA, how is this so important to This Is My Squad for them to know their people like the Vice is talking about?
What we're finding, and we all know, we've known this for years, is that the squad leader at that junior level, that's when they're going to see these things that are happening. I can notice what's going on in my squad as the Sergeant Major of the Army, but I don't know what's going on at Fort Bliss, Texas, in, 1st Armored Division, 1st Brigade, 1st Battalion, 1st Squad. That's impossible. In order to get out of this, the small unit leader needs to know they see an issue and then take an action. They can't just go, oh, yep, that's really bad for you, but I have to do something with it. So if we don't get to that level, I think we're just not going to move forward with a whole host of issues.
Absolutely. Well said, both Sir and Sergeant Major, for that phenomenal guidance. Sir, I'd like to transition back to you and another tough subject that we've all faced as leaders and soldiers across the Army, and it's going to take work to continue to get after this. Recently, you started a new initiative to tackle suicide amongst the ranks called A Life Worth Living. Could you please tell us a little bit more about this initiative and what you hope to achieve?
Absolutely, Sergeant Major. This initiative is the idea of building cohesive teams, which is the foundation of suicide prevention and culture. Sergeant Major said something very powerful when you asked him the question, why is it so important that squad leaders know their soldiers so well? We've all seen multiple times, hopefully in our careers, with me without a doubt, where a first-line supervisor knew and understood their soldiers like the back of their hand. They anticipate how they would react to things, understood them very intimately because they had a great, close relationship based on trust. We gathered the senior leadership across the Army, and we started talking about the growing concern that we had with the number of deaths by suicide as we continued to combat COVID, and as a byproduct, our concerns with the isolation that was associated with it, and that actually undermining those relationships of trust, mutual respect, and empathy that require maintenance. You can't just build a relationship and then let it be. It's something that requires maintenance, and you've got to be able to maintain it. You've got to maintain contact. And, we've got some great tools out there like Microsoft Teams. We've got FaceTime. We've got text messaging. But in my personal opinion, nothing replaces individual, personal interaction, even if that's with people with masks and gloves on. That interaction is critical because the squad leaders that can see their soldiers often are able to see that, okay, here's normal behaviors for this person because I know them so well. Then there comes a day where there's a transition in their life where something changes. They come late. They're not kept up well. The room that was perfectly arranged and maintained is not, or even alcohol in the breath of someone that typically didn't drink alcohol. There's things that only squad leaders that know their soldiers well can sense that the soldier's going through some sort of transition. And it's an opportunity to be able to take that soldier and try to help them because you've got a relationship based on trust where you can ask them hard questions. What's wrong? Something's different with you today. I need to get you some help. And because the soldier trusts their leader, they share with them what their concern is. And then the leader, because the lieutenants above, the captains above, everybody up the chain of command understands how important it is to equip these squad leaders with the education to know when they've got a problem, number one. And then number two, probably most important, they've got a problem that they're going to have to get some extra help on because they don't have the expertise to help that soldier with the problem. So if you have the education, you've got the will, and then the decision-making to be able to determine that I'm going to help this soldier wants my help, and I'm going to get him or her to help because I can't specifically help them with this. And then there's tough decisions associated with sometimes the soldier doesn't want help. We've all heard the soldier declined behavioral health help. Well, if they had a broken leg, would we decline health care for that soldier to have their leg mended? Absolutely not. With behavioral health, we've got to get soldiers and we got to convince them, if necessary, in some cases, we've got to just take them to behavioral health so that they can start getting the help to get on the road to a more resilient outcome, I'll say. So we stood up these monthly sessions with senior leaders across the Army. We did our fourth one just a week or two ago. It's been general officers with their sergeants major there, but the next one's going to be led by sergeants major. And what we're doing is we're discussing things that we want to change that were brought up from the grassroots level, deliberated amongst this body of senior leaders, and we're moving forward with changes to the way that we're preparing our soldiers, preparing our NCOs to be able to build these relationships of trust, mutual respect, and empathy. And so we're messaging that. We're discussing other things in there. We're talking about, in some cases, some best practices at some of the installations. We're also talking about some saves, some diving catches where someone was able to see a soldier was distressed, hopeless, but yet had the wherewithal to make that decision I described earlier and get that soldier to help so that you can help them manage that transition, get them more resilient, and then reintroduce them back into an environment where they're coping all on their own. But that takes time and it takes help. But these are the kind of things that we talk about.
Just wanted to capitalize on the fact that a powerful title like a life worth living is so important to these senior leaders. And getting it to the lowest level, I think, is what is the great thing behind This Is My Squad. So when we develop these much needed programs, both for you, sir, and for SMA, how important is it to get this down to the first line leaders, and how important is their role in a life worth living?
Well, number one, I know that there's at least one person that's listening out there that says all we're doing is we're changing the name from suicide prevention to life worth living. But think about it. We should be focusing on what keeps soldiers waking up every day and being motivated about what they're doing. What makes them want to be part of their team? What makes them want to move on beyond some adversity that they may have faced? It's incredibly important to understanding that. That's not preventing suicide. What that's doing is that is embracing life and all of its diversity. And each and every one of our soldiers has a different reason as to what motivates them to do what they do, to love every day that they're around, to be part of the Army as a soldier in a unit. But getting that down to the lowest level possible is critical, because if these soldiers and their leaders don't understand what their role is, then it will be very difficult to change across the Army. And we've got some great leaders out there, but we look at how we've, over time, attacked different problems that we've had. And in some cases, it's add additional people that have different additional duties, or someone that comes on and it's their only duty to help you with suicide prevention. We've created training for soldiers to do. But in my personal opinion, nothing is better than what we do when our squad leaders have relationships with their soldiers and can have tough discussions with their soldiers about, as the Sergeant Major talked about, where did you grow up? What have you been through in your life? And understanding the extra weight that each and every one of these soldiers carries around in their rucksack, and it's different for every soldier. But nevertheless, only the squad leader can have that kind of relationship, that strong of a relationship. Sergeant Major, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think when I talked originally, it's been going on for a year. When I said this is my squad, I started off with the leader in the middle. And the second thing I said, this is about a positive outlook on life. So it's a positive culture. And how do we look at things in a positive way? And then it'll make all those other things go away if we have those cohesive, well-trained, fit organizations based off a positive attitude. But it's not as easy. That's why I really like a life worth living. But here's the example I give. We had a very senior leader in our Army come to me and said, with Sergeant Major, we just had a suicide. So what are you gonna do? He says, well, Sergeant Major, we're gonna stand down, we're gonna talk about it. And I said, okay, well, let's think about this. How do you say TIMS, culture, positive attitude, you just had a suicide? I said, well, think about a life worth living. I said, well, why don't you go and have an organizational day? He looked at me like, well, that's, Sergeant Major, we had a suicide. I said, I know. But that's the whole point about a life worth living, is show them, go give them some things about what it's great to be alive. That's the positive attitude of This Is My Squad. Don't look at, oh, this is all the bad things. Show them, let's go do a team sport together. Let's go bowling. Let's play some golf. And let's build off that. Something that reminds me of what it's great to be alive. And, go do a training event and you can get these things. There's all these things. Why'd you join the Army? Because I love shooting that artillery round. So let's go to the field and shoot it. And, in one point in time in my career, we brought families out in the helicopters and said, hey, this is a howitzer. Let's show you how to shoot it. And they loved it. But that's what it means to be in my squad when you think of a positive way and you look at a life worth living. It's all those things that are great, and remind people what that means. And I think that's the positive way to look at it. And sometimes we do the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, and I love how these two programs, Sir and Sergeant Major, complement each other. This is my squad and a life worth living. Just to steal the phrase from the SMA, it's a positive aspect and outlook for the future, and getting it down to our lowest leaders and starting at the top with our most senior leaders as we provide the education and help, as you said, sir, is critically important. Gentlemen, I'd like to transition to another topic that's been brought to light due to recent events across our country, and even perhaps with even our military, the subject of racial diversity and inclusion. Both of you have been out front on this subject by posting videos to social media and talking to leadership across our Army, continuously stressing the importance of having these discussions across the formation. Why is it important for senior leaders to share their stories and ensure we continue this dialogue? General Martin?
Sir Major, I can't tell you how much I thank you for asking me to talk first, because there's no way I could follow SMA Grinston as he talks about it, because he's the master of listening sessions. But from my personal experience doing it here with my team, if you've seen the video on Facebook and Twitter, and then I've done this out just about everywhere that I visited. And in fact, I did one that was totally impromptu with the platoon that was really powerful. But you go in there and you sit down and you disarm them very quickly, describing exactly where you come from, your experiences in life, the things that concerned you during the course of your career. And then you ask this group of people, just tell me about you, where you came from, what your experiences were, and tell me what your thoughts are about what's been going on in this country over the past couple of months. And what's amazing, Sergeant Major, is I have in Team Vice, we've got some hand-picked people. Every single one of them is hand-picked, top-notch soldiers coming to work. They love their job, always a smile on their face. And we sit down and have this discussion. And so I led by example and explained to them, and you could see by the looks on their faces, I can't believe this 4-star general just revealed to me these things about himself. Well, if he's going to do it, I'm going to try it. And what came out of their mouths absolutely floored me in several cases, knowing that I'm looking at a top-notch soldier, always positive about everything, and they're talking about things that they had to experience in their childhood, had to experience coming into the Army, they had to experience during the course of their career in the Army that one would think would be unthinkable in this day and age. And so, regardless of the fact that I think that we live in the greatest country on the face of the earth, I really do. I sincerely mean that. And I say that to people. I say, as long as people are willing to put their lives on the line to get into this country, I believe that. I think we're in the most inclusive organization in the United States Army. That being said, with what I've heard in these listening sessions, we still have work to do on racial discrimination, equality, and to make sure that everybody is consistently treated with the dignity and respect that 1 in 300 people amongst the population of the United States of America who raise their right hand and swear an oath to an idea deserve. Sergeant Major?
Yeah, this is, how do you quickly build trust is really what we're talking about. If you can, as a leader, you can share a little bit of your story, you can quickly build trust in a room. And to get the soldiers to open up, I'll give 2 examples very quickly. I had one, and we start off again, the same question, how'd you grow up? He just went around the room, and he didn't say much. It's good life, it's good. But as the discussion went on, as I led to those more difficult questions, like, really, how did that make you feel? How did you grow up? Then at the end, he goes, now that everybody's kind of shared and opened up their trust, he said, well, let me tell you how I grew. I was orphaned. Imagine he was not willing to do that if we didn't build that trust and kind of tell them and you break down some of those walls. We all put them up for all the right reasons, but in order to really get past some of these issues that we're having in our country, we're going to have to really dig and say, what is going on, and get to know those people. And I think when we can share our story, I think that just kind of go, wow, I can really open up to the leaders. And that's just one. And every time I've done one of these sessions, it's incredible the stories that they say and how they go up. Sometimes it's heated, sometimes it's tense, and it's okay. But one thing that came out just a few minutes ago, I'm a little worried about is somebody goes, well, none of this is going on in my unit. You saw that question. It's like, I'm so-and-so's battalion commander, and that didn't happen in my unit. And I'm like, okay, well, just because it's not happened to you doesn't mean it's not happening in your unit. And the same thing when the question is, do you see all green? When you see all green and it's not happening in your unit, leads to that question is, when I take off that uniform and I walk outside the gate, am I treated differently because of the color of my skin? And do you recognize that that's happening to me? It didn't happen to you, but it's happening to me, and I'm a soldier. And I think we have to realize that. So I get very cautious when a battalion commander or a sergeant major would say, well, it's not in my unit. Well, it might not be right there in your unit, but it may be something your soldiers are dealing with. And that's why you got to get to know them. You got to ask those questions. And I thought that was pretty powerful, what was said in our last session.
And Sergeant Major, I'll say it again, when you said, just because it's not happening to me doesn't mean it's not happening to our Army is important. Our nation has looked to this Army and our military to lead in social problems throughout our nation's history, and they've done just that. And with great leaders like General Martin, yourself, and Sergeant Major, I'm confident that our Army will continue to lead this nation in the change that's necessary and have the conversations that must occur. General Martin, SMA Grinston, it was a pleasure to have both of you with us today to share your insight on these important topics. And I'd like to give both of you the opportunity to share any final thoughts you'd like to provide our listeners before we close. General Martin?
I'd just like to end with what I started with. I want leaders to care, and I want their soldiers to know that they care. And it's much more than a sentence to do that. It takes commitment. It takes education. It takes assigning responsibility and accountability. And it's not just accountability. This isn't all in the squad leaders' laps or in their rucksacks. This is a responsibility of everybody in the chain of command. We get this right. Many of the problems that we face that undermine our ability to accomplish our mission, training the Army and resourcing the Army, equipping the Army, setting the conditions for units to focus on that, is all undermined every time we have one of these corrosives we talked about occur. It takes an inordinate amount of energy, and sometimes at the highest levels of the Army. I'm not worried about anything coming up here. My point is that most of these can be mitigated if we have people who understand what it means to take care of soldiers and to do it so well that the soldiers genuinely believe that they're being taken care of. Thank you very much, Sergeant Major, for this opportunity to have this discussion with two great non-commissioned officers. Sergeant Major, over to you.
Sir, thank you. And, in closing, I just want to say, wow, not everybody gets to be the Sergeant Major of the Army during a global pandemic. I mean, it's been a heck of a year as we've gone through. I mean, we start off with, a strike on Soleimani, and then we're starting to see in Korea how this is starting to build as, what are we going to do? And then all of a sudden global pandemic hits, then we got racial tensions in our country. There's a lot of tension. It just feels, when you talk to soldiers, you can feel all these things are on us. But that's why it's great to be in our Army. We got leaders at every level. The secretary, the chief, the vice, the sergeant major of the Army are all willing not just to say, yeah, I know that's happening over there, but this isn't a business, this is a profession. And we want to take on those issues because we want to lead the nation. We are leading the nation. So it's a difficult time. We're still trying to figure out how do we get back to training. We're going to figure out all those things, again, on why it means to be great to be alive, what it's great to be in my squad. But this is where we're leading. We take on the difficult things that are challenging our nation, whether that's a global pandemic or if it's racial inclusion. We take those head on and we lead through that. And then we should, and we are, setting an example for our nation. And thank you for hosting this today.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, some powerful, important, and comforting words from two phenomenal leaders, the 37th Vice Chief of Staff of the Army and the 16th Sergeant Major of the Army. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Our time has come to an end to close this edition of the Soldier Today podcast. All of us here at the Association of the United States Army want to thank General Martin and SMA Grinston for joining us today for this great update on many of the ongoing initiatives across our Army. As Army alum, I can say from all of us across the country, thank you and all that you and your soldiers do each and every day for our nation.
To all our listeners, thanks for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to the Army Matters podcast on iTunes and everywhere podcasts are found. The Army Matters podcast series is brought to you by the Association of the United States Army, the U.S. Army's professional association, member-supported, Army-connected. Visit us at AUSA.org for more information or to become a member. Your membership helps AUSA continue to carry out its mission to educate, inform, and connect with the total Army, our industry partners, and our supporters of a strong national defense. For questions or to provide topic recommendations, email us at podcast@ausa.org. Have a great Army Day. Hua.